Hello and welcome. We're excited to continue with our food preservation series as we pressure can low-acid vegetables. Today we will be canning green beans.
We hope you've enjoyed the previous two videos in the series, making blackberry jam and canning tomato salsa. If you haven't seen them yet, we encourage you to view those on our website or YouTube channel. I'm Shannon Autry.
And I'm Julian Carpenter, and we are Family and Consumer Science Agents with the Cooperative Extension Service of the University of Arkansas System, Division of Agriculture. We are both registered dietitians, so sharing with everyone how to provide healthy, safe foods for our families is near and dear to our hearts.
The process and principles we discussed today can be applied to many types of low-acid foods, such as green beans, corn, potatoes, beans, meats, seafood, and even mixed foods like soups. However, each food type will have its own set of ingredients, procedures, and processing times.
So be sure to utilize a reliable source like So Easy to Preserve, the National Center for Home Food Preservation website, or the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning for detailed information on the food type you would like to preserve.
All vegetables other than tomatoes are considered low-acid foods. This means the pH of the food is higher than 4.6 and is less acidic than fruit products, acidified tomatoes, salsas, and other items that can be safely canned using the water bath method. Water bath canning relies on the acidity of the product and the lack of oxygen to create an environment that bacteria and microorganisms cannot grow.
And since we do not have the acidity to help us with preserving, raising the temperature high enough for a specific amount of time is how we can ensure a safe product. Botulism is especially of concern as it can cause neurological issues and even death if it is ingested. To destroy botulism spores, the food product must reach 240 degrees. The addition of pressure allows the temperature within the canner to rise above the boiling point of 212 degrees to reach 240 degrees. Processing the jars at higher temperature for the specified amount of time listed in your tested and approved recipe ensures that you will have a safe, shelf-stable product.
Unlike water bath canning, pressure canning requires a purpose-built pressure canner and must be done in a canner, not a pressure cooker. To be classified as a pressure canner, the vessel must hold at least 4 upright, closed quart jars. Smaller pressure cookers or pressure saucepans heat too quickly and cool down too slowly to provide adequate heat for a canning process. Both heating and cooling down times are included in calculating the recommended process for killing the organism that causes botulism.
Some manufacturers of smaller pressure cooking devices say that they can be used for pressure canning, but it is the consumer's responsibility to check with manufacturers about processing recommendations for these devices. The same is true with tabletop electric pressure canning devices because they have not been tested or approved by the USDA or an outside entity for pressure canning.
Before we begin, let's discuss the equipment needed and the different types of pressure canners. There are 2 types of pressure canners, weighted gauge and dial gauge. Dial gauge canners should be tested yearly and inspected regularly for signs of wear or damage. Your local county extension office can assist you with yearly testing. While dial gauge canners require regular maintenance, they are our recommended type of pressure canner due to the ease of use. Weighted gauge canners have a larger margin for error since it relies on the user to keep up with how often the gauge is rocking per minute to ensure it's at the proper pressure. If you're utilizing a weighted gauge canner, refer to the manufacturer's booklet for complete instructions on determining pressure.
You should be sure your canner is in working order and all safety features are functional. Your canner should include a flat rack in the bottom, a pressure indicator, a vent pipe with a dead weight or a petcock, safety valves, a lock that secures the lid when pressurized, and some canners include a rubber gasket to seal the lid. Other canners, like the All-American here, have a metal-on-metal seal with wing nuts and bolts to secure the lid.
The rest of the tools needed are very similar to items needed for water bath canning. You'll need a stove top with burners that are approved for home canning. Some smooth top stoves cannot be used for canning. Refer to your appliances book to check. We'll be using the Presto pressure canner since this is widely available in many stores and online and is an economical choice for home canners.
Today we have enough green beans to preserve 8 pints, but it is always a good idea to have an extra jar or 2 ready. As with most recipes for canning vegetables, the method we are using does not call for a specific amount of green beans, so it can be easily scaled to match the amount of green beans that you harvest or purchase. However, if you are using a canning recipe from an approved source that calls for specific measurements of ingredients, it is important to follow those closely. We have already washed our jars, lids, and rings and inspected them for any damage. After washing, we have placed them in our canner with 2 to 3 inches of water to keep them warm. Sterilizing the jars is not necessary when pressure canning.
Washing your jars is a great opportunity to check for any nicks, cracks, or imperfections that may cause issues. Also be sure your lids and rings are not warped, damaged, or rusty. Your flat lids should be new each time, but you may reuse the rings and jars as long as they're in good condition. Any jars with imperfections should be discarded since they could cause your lid to not seal or they may break under pressure.
Today, we'll need a large stock pot and various measuring and cooking utensils. We'll also need a jar lifter, a jar funnel, a headspace tool, bubble freer. Ours is 2-in-1, but you can also use a table knife or narrow spatula, and of course, pot holders and towels for safety. We have a stock pot of water on, and we are bringing that to a boil.
We'll be demonstrating both the hot pack and the raw pack method. Many vegetables allow you to choose which method. Just be sure to follow the recipe closely for whichever one you choose. Raw packing is usually the quickest method, but some prefer the color and flavor of hot packed. Raw packed foods also look more uniform in the jar because there's less water loss from inside the food that happens while processing. This can leave you with excess liquid at the bottom of the jar, which doesn't affect the safety of the product, just the appearance. With hot packing, the water loss happens during the cooking phase.
For both methods, you will begin by rinsing your beans and removing any damaged pods. You can snap off the ends of the beans and then snap them into 1-inch pieces, or use a knife to cut them to size. You can also choose to leave the beans whole, as long as they fit in your jar, leaving the appropriate headspace.
Okay, let's get started canning. For a raw pack, remove your jar from the canner and place the hot jars on a towel-covered countertop. A cool countertop could shock the jars and cause them to break. Place the funnel on your jar, then with clean hands, fill the jar tightly with beans, leaving 1 inch of headspace.
If desired, add a half teaspoon of canning salt to each packed jar. Canning salt does not have the additives like table salt. Using canning salt helps keep the liquid inside from looking cloudy. The salt is not necessary for preservation and is simply for flavor.
Using the ladle and the canning funnel, fill each jar with boiling water from your stock pot, ensuring you leave 1 inch of headspace. You'll then use your bubble releaser to free any bubbles. Gently move the releaser in and out around the edges of your jar. Measure and add water to reach the 1 inch headspace. Ensuring proper headspace is important for a safe product. Too much headspace may mean that all the oxygen is not expelled from the jar during processing. Too little headspace could cause seepage and lifting of the lid, leading to spoilage.
After adjusting the headspace, use a damp cloth or paper towel to wipe the rim of the jars. Apply the lids and place the rings on the jar. The rings should only be fingertip tight. You want to feel a little bit of resistance when tightening the rings using only the tips of your thumb, index finger, and middle finger. Over tightening may cause the lid to buckle or not be able to release the oxygen that is inside the jar. That oxygen release is crucial for safe preservation of the food inside the jar.
Okay, we'll set our raw pack beans aside and show you the hot pack method next. Next, we'll prepare the beans using the hot pack method. Place your prepared beans in a stock pot with boiling water and boil for 5 minutes. After boiling for 5 minutes, turn off the heat. When your beans are almost ready, go ahead and remove your jars so they'll be ready to fill. All right, we're ready to jar our beans using the hot pack method. Using your funnel and a slotted spoon, fill the jars with your heated beans, again leaving 1 inch of headspace. Yeah. Okay, after placing the beans in the jars, add a ½ teaspoon of canning salt, if you like, to each jar. Then you're going to fill the jars with the cooking liquid. Release the bubbles and check for 1 inch headspace, just like we did with the raw pack method.
After packing the jars, everything is the same for the raw pack and hot pack method. I like to pre-label my lids with green beans, the date, and raw or hot so I know which way they were packed. That way you can decide if you prefer one method over the other. Now you are ready to transfer your jars to the canner that is filled with 2 to 3 inches of simmering water. If you need to adjust the water in the canner, add it before placing your jars inside.
As you place the jars in the canner, make sure to keep them level so no liquid seeps under the lid. I use a pot holder under the jar in case my lifter slips. I don't want to damage my jar. As you add the jars, the water level will rise. Make sure that the water doesn't go over the top of the lids. If it does, you're going to want to use a ladle to remove the excess water.
Once your jars are placed in the canner, place the lid on the canner. It is a good idea to practice placing the lid while the canner is empty so you get the hang of it before it is hot and full of jars. After the lid is secured, turn your burner up to full heat. It may take a bit of time, but we are looking to see a strong, steady funnel of steam coming from the vent.
Venting removes the excess air from the canner and ensures there's a pure steam environment inside. This allows the higher temperature of 240 degrees to be met since a mixture of steam and air is cooler than pure steam. Once your canner has the strong, steady steam coming from the vent, set a timer for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, place your weight on top of the vent using a mitt.
Now it's time to build pressure. Our green beans call for 11 pounds of pressure on our dial gauge canner. If you're canning above 1,000 feet of altitude, you may need to make adjustments. Contact your county Family and Consumer Science agent for assistance or refer to the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. Once the correct pressure is met, you will need to maintain it for the entire processing time. If the pressure dips below 11, the processing time will need to be restarted once you get back to the correct pressure. It is better to maintain the pressure slightly above 11 rather than risk going under pressure. However, big shifts in pressure can cause undesirable liquid loss within your jars. For this step, you must stay nearby and watch the gauge closely because you will need to make adjustments to the heat to keep the pressure where you need it.
After processing 20 minutes, the green beans are almost ready. Turn off the heat and allow the canner to depressurize naturally. Do not remove the weight or attempt to cool the canner with water or in any other way. After the pressure is at 0 and the lid lock drops, you're going to take a mitt and remove the weight. Then, with pot holders or oven mitts, open the canner lid away from you to allow any remaining steam to escape. The jars need to be left undisturbed on the countertop for 12 to 24 hours. If any jars remain unsealed after the 12 to 24 hours, you can reprocess them or simply place them in the refrigerator and use them up within a few days.
Remove the rings from your sealed jars and place them in a clean, dark, dry place for storage. The jars should not be stored with rings on. If you leave the ring on, the lid could come unsealed and the product inside can spoil. Leaving the ring may cause the lid to falsely seal back down and you would not know that the product is spoiled. Removing the ring makes sure that the lid does not lift and then seal back down.
If you haven't already labeled your jars with the date and contents, be sure to do that before storage. Now all that's left is to clean up and store your canner. You should thoroughly clean and dry your canner between uses. Refer to your manufacturer's instructions for complete cleaning and storage information.
If you have any questions, refer to the resources listed with the video, and always feel free to reach out to your county Family and Consumer Science agent at your county extension office.
Thanks for joining us on Preserving for You.